The house had been quieter lately, too quiet. I used to believe silence meant peace, but now it only filled me with unease. My husband, Mark, had grown distant. His kisses, once warm, had cooled into mere formalities. I told myself it was stress, the weight of work pressing down on him. But deep down, I knew better. Then there was Jake, Mark's son from his first marriage. At 21, he was old enough to have his own life, yet something about his recent behavior unsettled me. He had become secretive, slipping away into his room for hours. He barely spoke at dinner, his eyes avoiding mine. When I tried to make conversation, he offered clipped responses, his voice tight, controlled. I wouldn't have thought much of it, young men need their space, but then I started noticing the small things, long showers that left the bathroom thick with steam. The sound of hushed voices at odd hours, though I never heard anyone respond. The way he flinched when I entered the room unexpectedly, as if caught doing something he shouldn't. One evening, as I cleared the dishes, I heard it again, water running in the bathroom, far longer than necessary. I glanced at the clock. Nearly 30 minutes. My instincts whispered that something wasn't right. I walked down the hall, my bare feet making no sound against the hardwood floor. The door was slightly ajar, just enough to see movement through the fogged-up mirror. Jake stood at the sink, his back to me, hunched over as he scrubbed something under the running faucet. His hands moved frantically, as if trying to erase evidence of something. I should have turned away. I should have respected his privacy. But a gnawing curiosity, no, a need to understand, kept me rooted in place. Jake? My voice was soft, careful. He froze. The sound of rushing water filled the space between us. Slowly, he turned his head, his expression caught between shock and guilt. What are you doing? I asked, stepping closer. He swallowed hard. Nothing. Just washing up. I glanced at his hands, still gripping the edge of the sink. Whatever he had been scrubbing was gone now, but the tension remained, thick in the air between us. I could have pressed him. I could have demanded answers. Instead, I met his gaze, searching for something, an explanation, an unspoken truth, but before I could say another word, he shut off the water, grabbed a towel, and brushed past me without another glance. I stood there for a long time, staring at the sink, listening to the echo of his retreating footsteps. Something wasn't right. And I wasn't going to let it go. I couldn't let it go. The image of Jake's tense shoulders, the frantic way he scrubbed at his hands, it clung to me, an itch beneath my skin. I told myself it was just a young man's secret, something harmless, something not meant for my concern. But the doubt lingered. The next morning, as I sipped my coffee at the kitchen counter, I watched him. He sat across from me, spooning cereal into his mouth without meeting my eyes. His usual confidence, his casual smirks and easy charm, was gone. He looked rattled. You were in the bathroom for a while last night, I said, my tone light, casual. His spoon paused midair before clinking softly against the bowl. Yeah. Just needed to clean up. I set my mug down. You seemed upset. He finally met my gaze, and for a brief second, something flickered there, panic, guilt, something deeper. But then he masked it, forcing a shrug. It's nothing. Don't worry about it. I didn't believe him. That night, long after Mark had gone to bed, I lingered in the hallway. Jake's room was dimly lit, the door slightly open. Inside, I could see him sitting at the edge of his bed, staring at something in his hands. His shoulders were hunched, his expression unreadable. I hesitated. Crossing a line now meant no turning back. But something compelled me forward, the need to understand outweighing the risk of intrusion. I pushed the door open. Jake. His head snapped up. His hands moved instinctively, shoving whatever he was holding beneath his pillow. What are you doing? My voice was steady, but my heart pounded. His chest rose and fell in quick succession. It's nothing. I stepped closer. He stiffened but didn't move. My eyes flickered to the pillow. Jake, what are you hiding? Silence. Then, hesitantly, he pulled out the object. A small, folded piece of fabric. As he opened it, my breath caught. A woman's scarf. The scent of unfamiliar perfume drifted toward me, delicate yet unmistakable. My mind raced, piecing together the fragments. The long showers. The nervous energy. The guilt in his eyes. Jake, I whispered. Whose is that? He clenched his jaw. It doesn't matter. But it did, because the scarf wasn't mine. And it certainly didn't belong to him. The realization settled over me, heavy and suffocating. There was another woman's presence in this house, unseen, unnoticed, and Jake was keeping her secret. I swallowed hard. Does your father know? Jake exhaled sharply, shaking his head. His silence confirmed what I feared. This wasn't just about him, this was about Mark, and now, I had a choice to make. I turned toward the door, my pulse racing. Whatever was happening, I was in the middle of it now. And there was no turning back. I barely slept that night. The scarf, its scent, its presence, lingered in my mind like a shadow, twisting my thoughts into knots. Every possibility ran through my head, none of them by morning. I knew what I had to do. Mark sat at the breakfast table, flipping through emails on his phone, oblivious to the storm brewing in my chest. Jake was nowhere to be seen, probably avoiding me. I placed a cup of coffee in front of my husband, my hand steady despite the turmoil inside me. We need to talk. Mark glanced up, brow furrowing. About what? I hesitated, choosing my words carefully. About Jake. His posture stiffened. What about him? I slid into the chair across from him, inhaling deeply. I think he's hiding something. Something big. Mark set his phone down, finally giving me his full attention. What are you talking about? I hesitated, then told him everything: Jake's late-night behavior, the tension in his eyes, the scarf hidden beneath his pillow. As I spoke, Mark's expression darkened, his fingers tightening around his coffee mug. When I finished, silence hung between us, heavy and unyielding. You think he's seeing someone? Mark finally asked, his voice even but laced with something unreadable. I shook my head. It's more than that. He's protecting someone. And I don't think you're going to like who. Mark exhaled sharply, rubbing a hand over his face. Damn it, Jake. His reaction sent a cold wave of certainty through me. He knew something. I leaned forward. Mark, what aren't you telling me? He hesitated. A flicker of conflict crossed his face before he finally met my gaze. There's been tension at work. A woman. He exhaled, jaw clenching. She's been messaging me. Showing up at places she shouldn't. I told her to stop, but I felt the ground shift beneath me. But she didn't. Mark shook his head. I never told Jake. But if he found out, he might have tried to handle it himself. The pieces fell into place. The secret meetings. The guilt in Jake's eyes. The scarf. It belonged to her, and Jake was protecting me. The realization sent a chill down my spine. This wasn't just infidelity, it was something deeper, something dangerous. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Jake appeared, pausing when he saw us, his expression guarded. Mark turned to him, his face unreadable. Jake. We need to talk. Jake's jaw tightened. I already know what you're going to say. Mark stood, his voice steady. Then say it first. Jake glanced at me, something like regret flashing in his eyes. She's not going to stop, he murmured. And I don't think you understand how far she'll go. The room fell silent. I swallowed hard. This wasn't just a family secret anymore, this was a threat, and we weren't ready for what came next. Jake's words sent a ripple of unease through the room. Mark stiffened, his expression shifting from frustration to something colder. What do you mean, she won't stop? Jake hesitated, then exhaled sharply. She's been following you, Dad. Calling me. Leaving things at the house. His eyes flickered to me. She wanted me to tell you to leave. To walk away from this marriage. The breath left my lungs. Mark's face darkened. That's insane. Jake shook his head. No. It's calculated. She's obsessed with you, Dad. And when she realized she couldn't have you, she decided to destroy everything you love instead. A chill ran down my spine. Mark ran a hand over his face, muttering a curse. I should have handled this sooner. I turned to Jake. The scarf, was it hers? He nodded. She left it in my car. I found it before Dad could. His voice dropped lower. She said if I didn't help her, she'd make sure you found out in the worst way possible. Mark's knuckles turned white against the table. This ends now. Jake let out a humorless laugh. It won't be that easy. The words hung in the air like a warning. I swallowed past the lump in my throat. Then we need to be ready. Mark reached for my hand, his grip firm. I'm not losing this family over a lie. Jake exhaled, shoulders sagging. Then we better move fast. The storm hadn't passed, it was just beginning.